Hi, welcome back to Sincere Practice. Today we have back Dr. Niloufer Merchant and Gina Kiem. We're doing part 2 of Polyvagal theory for women of color. Our last episode actually did really well, so that was really good. How are you both doing today?
Really good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Really, I had a chance to, just do my morning routine of my tea. I'm still sipping on my tea. So it's always a little bit, it's always a combination of feeling that sympathetic energy of, oh, I got to do all these things or this is coming up. And so I could feel my anxiety. And then I very intentionally had to do some things to get myself to bring my nervous system to settle down a little bit. And I do my yoga and my prayers in the morning, and that always helps me to put it all in perspective. Yeah. But it's lovely
Yeah.
to see both of you. I have to say that I really enjoyed our time last time, and I know that there is a lot that we have to say, so I'm excited for our time together today.
Me too. What about for yourself,
Yeah.
Gina? How's your morning?
It has been a wonderful morning. I got up a little earlier than expected again. It was like 5:30 in the morning, but I had a good sleep and um, I did some meditation, some grounding meditation, and I just, just in this space now, I think what helped me, like Niloufer was like, because when we do podcasts, we're thinking, right? But we're also being. And so as I was meditating, I had just kind of come to this realization that if it's okay with you both, is just to welcome our ancestors in this room and just to bring them home for those of you who have loved ones who have passed or those who have relatives who are alive in their bodies and moving life forward. And it just helped me. Like I thought about both my mom and dad who have passed away, and it just eased my sense of like isolation, I guess is the word, that I was actually connected to something deeper. And this is why we're doing this work. So I just wanted to invite you to bring yours, and I have mine with me. So my beloved parents are just resourcing me at this moment. So thank you for showing up too, Helen, in the way that you do to bring us to slow down.
That's funny that you mentioned slowing down. Like one of the things that I feel like I'm feeling convicted about just in my spiritual practice is how fast I've been going. So I love that we all get to talk about how our mornings are doing, because I think the main topic for today is just how polyvagal theory can be applied in our day-to-day life. And this morning I was in prayer, I was reading my Bible, I went on a long walk. And one of the things that I realized, because my in-laws are in town, is the ability to be able to pause and just intake the value of family. And it's just so rare, like the fast pace of just how American society goes. It's hard to hear your own thoughts. But I do want to start on a personal note. Last episode, we talked a lot about polyvagal theory in practice for women of color. But as women of color, I'd love to hear about how you recognize some of your sympathetic nervous system, how you go back into relaxation, how you've seen clients go into sympathetic, parasympathetic, just hearing your experience. Does that question make sense?
Or you've got
Absolutely.
something.
And I do feel that nervous system recognition and acknowledgement really helps in finding that rhythm and finding a balance for yourself. If I may just say, like for the morning, you asked me about the morning, I just want to contextualize what's happening in the world right now. So oftentimes I wake up and I just feel this sense of fear and dread at what's happening, what has happened in the world since I slept, and what are we about to face. And I feel the heaviness in the morning as I wake up. And so I do feel that as I do that, I have to spend time bringing myself down from that and actively working on either breathing or finding quiet in prayer and meditation and yoga. Yeah. So thank you for asking about the morning, because I think that is so important how we start our day.
Mhm.
And I can also say one thing about the ancestors is I also want to say thank you for that because I too start my morning just remembering all of the people who have passed and all the people who are in my life. And that is one of my anchors we can talk about later as well. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, and thank you, Niloufer. I think for me, just polyvagal theory itself, just understanding the nervous system and how it interacts with us in every lived experience that we have, it's just so confirming and so hopeful that I have a tool, like I have a skill set and a resource that I can go to at any moment and say, Gina, where are you? Like you wake up this morning and I woke up this morning actually feeling, relatively peaceful, a little bit activated because I knew I was coming on, but also it was at that moment when I was like, what's happening in my body, right? It becomes right away. I know that, oh, I'm thinking this and I'm feeling a niggling of anxiety, then something's going on internally. Sort of like Niloufer was sharing, it's this work of that liberation psychology of using your lived experiences from the inside out, listening to the body rather than what somebody is telling you about anxiety. Because my anxiety is going to be different from Niloufer's or different from yours, Helen, but we all understand the underlying code of anxiety, that physiological response. So then when I recognize, oh, what would help me anchor? What would help me kind of come back home? Mom and dad, and where are they in the world? There's a place that they're buried, and I know that I can go to. Physically, I can go to that location and say hello. So, and I appreciated that morning question because it allowed us to come right in the present moment, And that's where the slowing down, the lack of urgency comes into being.
Mm.
So, how about you, Helen?
What anchors me in the morning?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love getting to wake up with my husband. That's like the first thing. And then the second thing is getting to make a fresh cup of coffee. I used to drink 3 or 4 a day, which would also activate me, but I've actually transitioned more into ginger lemon tea, which is another one of
Oh,
my favorites because I love how it just like refreshes my throat. I used to have a ton of acid reflux because of how much coffee I would drink. It's like a family tradition in our family, like in Filipino tradition. A lot of families will drink coffee after a meal. So I'll have breakfast and coffee, lunch and coffee, dinner and coffee. And so it's made me really immune to the natural rhythms of my own nervous system and how tired I can get at night. So it's been an adjustment to take life a lot more slowly and to have my brain almost detox from the effects of having so much caffeine in my system. So that's been a new practice for me of just doing that. And then I love going on long morning walks. So I live in a pretty suburban community. So I get to hear the laughter of children, moms walking their kids to school. I read my Bible, I pray through my day, I talk about what I'm learning with my husband, so we usually have breakfast and morning coffee together. It's a pretty elaborate morning routine that I feel like I've developed over the years, but it changes here and there, but it's naturally the same. Long walks, coffee, and then some tea, but today I didn't really get to have my tea, so I'm probably gonna have it after. Yeah. Yeah.
thank you.
I did have a question about honoring our ancestors, right? Because I think that a lot of the people that listen come from the US, and there are a lot of traditions around honoring family burials. In the Philippines, where my mom is from, Loag City, November 1st is a day where you come to your family's burial, honor your ancestors, right? But sort of give us some contextual understanding as to why that might be important to acknowledge, where that comes from, honoring our ancestors.
Niloufer, do you want to start? Or
Go ahead.
yeah. So a lot of my work, ancestral work, is from work that I've been involved with in family constellations. And so I had a beautiful Shoshone tribe indigenous teacher who sort of welcomed me into this work along with many dear other teachers. And I think for me, and I think why this particular healing, I don't want to call it a modality because I think it's just the experience of being human that we all have. If we talk about even nervous systems, there is a clear sense that physiologically we have come to this world because our parents gave us life. That's a biological fact. And so, and with that life, we can feel responsible. of how to move this life forward. And so even though my parents may have immigrated, to Canada, it still is my responsibility to do what I think is important to allow that legacy to move forward in a good way, in a good way. And also understanding that our ancestors had a lot of suffering, pain, survival, ways of living and being, especially those who have immigrated. And so when I think about the modernity of using this ancestral lens, it's very different from the Eurocentric lens where we may not look at ancestors in this way. But I think that's changing. I think in all cultures and in all societies, we benefit from looking at those who have come before us because we get to be resourced by their skill sets and by their knowledge and by their ancient wisdom, as we talk about, which can be profoundly healing. Um, yeah. Niloufer, did you want to share?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I'll just speak very specifically from my traditions. I was raised in India, and I talked in the last episode, having grown up or born in the Yemen in the Middle East, moving to India in the boarding school. But I was also surrounded by a lot of my extended family members in that same city, and so we moved from aunt to uncle to aunt to uncle. So that experience of being raised by a village and hearing stories about being raised by a village, right? So I would hear the stories of my uncles and my aunts would share about my grandmother. I never had the privilege of actually meeting any of my grandparents. So on both sides, they died before I was born, and so all I have is stories. And it wasn't very apparent in the moment of paying homage to ancestors as such. However, I have come to appreciate that more and more. And as I incorporate this work in my life, that it's really that intergenerational story that carries us. And so I'll share a very personal story in some of my own work and getting to know myself and my own therapy. At one point, I had this vision of my grandmother that showed up for me in a very strong way. And my grandmother, my mother's side, what I know about her and what the stories were is that she was just a very warm, loving, kind, giving person who pretty much took in all kids in the neighborhood or even my father included. That's how my parents met, apparently, is that my father was an orphan at the time, was brought into the home because my uncle and he were best friends. Anyhow, what it means for me is that there's something bigger than me. There's something that I carry, like Gina said, a responsibility, but also a legacy. And so when I can touch that space of ancestors and calling in ancestors, so one of my morning routines is there's a prayer that follows. Whenever you remember the dead, there is one of the surahs in the Quran that you pray, the Yasin, and then you call in their names. And so what I do is I pray that in the morning, and then I call in all of my uncles and aunts. This vision of anchoring in the work of Deb Dana, who's done some incredible work, and both Gina and I are very profoundly influenced by her in our work. And I know Gina has worked very closely with Deb. But one of the things she talks about is how do we find our anchor in ventral. And my anchor in ventral, this is my vision. This is a very personal vision. And I share that with my clients as well. That is my ancestors holding me up in ventral. And as soon as I can bring that image to mind, there is something that is bigger than me that's holding me there and that they have my back. Like I just literally have that image. So it's just very special to me. And it also, by calling in ancestors, I think not only our own ancestors, but the ancestors who lived in this land that we are part of now, it feels that we have a responsibility to this land as well, and a responsibility to the world, because I think that we have learned the story of my ancestors is really a story of struggle. And I think a lot of people will identify that and especially in the South Asian community, I just say that is that because there is so much poverty and struggle, it's always that you have to work hard in order to get out of that. And I would say that that's might be true for a lot of Asian communities, that pressure to do well, to study, to, what's the education expectations. Yeah, so there's just so much.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think that, you know, I want to acknowledge that for a lot of the women that listen to this podcast are in 18 to 25, early 30s range. And when we hear the term honoring our ancestors, sometimes it could be met with a lot of skepticism, but without the understanding, right, of where we've come from and how we've gotten here, it, all of these terms can get so lost. And
Mhm.
I think me in asking that question was wanting to just honor your practices, but also wanting to get context of the why behind it all. Because I remember talking to someone about just family lineage and the importance of acknowledging family history. And sometimes it's hard for us to feel safe in a land that originally wasn't built for us if we don't have context of where we've come from. So just wanting to honor that as well. But in terms of the word safe, I think one of the key pillars of Polyvagal is helping a client feel safe. How do you help a client feel safe before giving them practical tools, insights, honesty? It takes time to build honesty in a therapeutic practice, but how do you guide a client in doing that?
I can share sort of what I do in my practice. And I think you hit a very key word, Helen, that really safety
Hmm.
in the system is most paramount. So it's not about thinking, how do I get out of this? What am I
Hmm.
feeling? Am I feeling safe enough in my own body, which includes your brain, right? To do something. It doesn't matter what you're doing. It could just mean waking up, right? Am I safe enough to wake up? Depending on what context you're living in. It could be a war-torn country. It could be something that's happening in, like for Niloufer, with ice and in Minneapolis and
Hmm.
Minnesota. So, and for me, there was a tragic accident here just not recently, but a while back, and just being present with that and holding that. So I just want to bring some context too, because I don't want to forget the ancestral piece that you had just brought up about the women that attend or that actually view this podcast are between, I think, 18 and 30.
Hmm.
And
18
so
and early 30s. Yeah.
some may have experienced loss, some may not have. And so the ancestral piece may be like something like it is just not a lived experience yet, a real tangible one. We know what happens, but it's not integrated in the body yet. And I honestly know what that means because when it wasn't happening to me in my 20s, I thought I had no problems. Not that death is a problem, but I didn't understand the loss, the experience of loss in my nervous system. I didn't
Mm.
understand that. And so everything was about me, right?
What before you go on,
Yeah.
like, what is loss in our nervous system? Can you describe that?
For me, loss in a nervous system means that I begin to um, feel in my body as if it's like grief or a shutdown or sadness. So just to give you context, when I was in my early 30s, I had actually my later 20s, at 28, I had my first daughter. And at 6 weeks old, I received a phone call from a family member who had said, Mom went into cardiac arrest, had a seizure, a brain seizure, and she's in a coma. And my nervous system just went, this is a woman who I said, Mom, what would I ever do without you? Right. And
Yeah.
I'm a new mom. Didn't know what to do. I rushed to this hospital, I lived on the island, so I had to take a ferry, rush her to the hospital. And we spent 2 weeks watching her try to live. And she
Mm.
did. She did. And my daughter was 6 weeks old. My mother was at the time 62. So
Mm.
young, young. And so she did wake up, but she never really woke up to the degree that I wanted her back as my mom because she was in a coma.
Mm.
She only had a short-term memory, a long-term memory. So everything was very in the moment and she wasn't my mom. So when I talk about loss, you don't even realize it's loss
Right.
until 2 years later, because I'm talking about this experience I'm having and I'm wanting my mom, please come back. And she's just not who she is. And so that loss is wishing that that her essence was back with me being my mom, right?
Yeah.
To help me be a mom, kind of. And so in the nervous system, for me, it was this constant survival, this anxiety. Please come back. Oh, she's not going to come back, And how do I help her? But I can't help her. I'm so consumed with my daughter. But looking back, so there's a ventral story here. Looking back, if I had just known, because my father had had some strokes too and dementia. Looking back, I think if I had just allowed myself to see her in that moment as my mother, not wanting her to come back, just seeing that this was still my mom in a body that just is different,
Mm,
it would have really helped to soothe that 2-year grieving process. She was
yeah.
alive. Her physical body was alive.
Yeah.
But I just couldn't see her because I was consumed by my nervous system's need to protect itself from deep sadness. And so I just honor her today. And it's so funny that when we bring the ancestors in the room, they come. They
Mhm.
come, you
Yeah,
know?
the warmth in your heart
Yes.
and the delight and joy.
Well,
I
yeah.
what's funny is when around the time I was born, my grandma had experienced abdominal pancreatic pain and died a week after I was born. I was actually supposed to be named Isabel, and my grandma's last dying wish, because my grandma also had macular degeneration, which means her vision wasn't as good. And so my dad took a picture of me as a baby, showed my grandma because she never got to meet me, and she said, "Can you please name her Helen? Can you please name her after me?" And a few days later, she died. And my dad, we actually my in-laws are in town, so I got to see my parents yesterday, and my parents don't live far from me, and I could see my dad tearing up. And for the first time as a married adult, like on my way to having my own family, I could experience the pain he must have gone through having a newborn baby and also going through the grief of the loss of his mother. And then a few years later, like my grandpa died. So my mom had to grieve my grandpa's death while also raising me and my sister. So it's just the importance of honoring family. Is so, so important because if we don't acknowledge the history of that, we can't really understand what's happening to our bodies, right? So I also love the story you shared, Niloufer, of growing up with uncles and growing up in a family full of story, because that's also how I was raised too. All I know about my grandma are stories. And when we immigrated here, I never got to see my dad's side of the family. So all I know about my family is through oral tradition, you
Mhm.
know? And so that's so important, the safety of what's to come. I'm curious about the regret you talk about, Gina, when you share about your mom. Thank you for being so
Mhm.
vulnerable and open about
Mhm.
that. How did you reframe the story of, rather than wanting to have her back,
Mhm.
being in her presence?
I have an incredible family. I have
Yeah.
not only my 2 beautiful daughters and their partners, I have an incredibly supportive husband, just a really amazing man, and siblings. So, and a dad who was still alive taking care of my mom. So, how did I get through it? I got it
Mhm.
through connection and community with my family. They were my solid anchors. And if you're lucky to have that, that is a gift. But if you don't have that, I want to honor those people who don't have those people. It could mean me as their therapist or you as their therapist, right? That will help secure them to come back into ventral. But the way that I now looking back, I really realized that they were formidable in every place that I walked on in grief. And honestly, I think for me personally, it was seeing my mom that she's transitioned out of her physical form, but she's so alive in me and in my children, in the gifts that I see that my children have inherited. See, even my youngest daughter never met her, but she is a ceramic artist. She's a potter. I see, because my mother was very good at gardening and needlepoint and embroidery, and I see those gifts being transmitted to my daughter in ways that I
Wow.
say, she doesn't even know her. And she says, I feel grandma. Like, I feel, and I said, yeah. And it's sort of what you and Niloufer and I were talking about, that you learn them through stories,
Mhm.
but you begin to embody those stories. And
Mm.
then they feel authentic. They feel like,
Mm,
wow. And you don't have to question it. You just know it
yeah.
in your bones, right? In your blood. So, and in your nervous system, and deeper than that. So, it is really a gift. It is a gift that I would say my mother's death in my early 30s was a gift to come home to me.
Wow.
It was permission to say, "You live your life now,"
Mm,
and for me to let her go. Yeah, in a different way. Yeah.
wow. Niloufer, I see you shaking your head. Is
Yeah.
there anything you want to say?
Yeah. No, thank you, Gina, for sharing that story. Like that, as soon as you hear about your mother, it pulls up all the stories
Yeah.
about my mother,
Mhm.
right?
Sweet
And
mamas.
you're so right about loss, but when we lose them, that loss is what brings us to a deeper level of
Mhm.
connection and perhaps. So I was thinking about your question, Helen, about so how does loss show up in our nervous system? That's such a beautiful question.
Mhm.
And I was thinking about me because my own losses, so I lost both my parents as well. And I lost a sister whom I was very, very close to, which I feel her very deeply in my heart. I still do. Is now 15 years. I can't remember. I lose track of time.
Mhm.
2015, 11 years. And her that anniversary is coming up in 5 day in on the 20th. So I can feel that my nervous system has been there's I've been feeling something, but I don't even know what I was feeling until I name it to say that, okay, it makes sense. Her that anniversary is coming up. But so how does it show up in my nervous system? It shows up as a yearning, a longing to be with the person that you were so close to, that they're no longer there. So while there is that sadness, which is a defense state, if you look at it in terms of polyvagal
Mhm.
theory, there's also yearning for connection and missing that level of connection, right, that you had. And so one of the ways that I carry my mother, my parents around with me, my sister around me, is I always have something that, for instance, I wear my mom's wedding ring. I wear her ring and that's always with me and that carries me.
Wow.
So that's my anchor. That's when I feel my sister was loved scarves. And so I always either wear her scarf or I wear a scarf that keeps
Wow.
me connected to my sister. And my dad
Mm.
was always one who, was a man of conviction. And I remember his words and how, so when I'm struggling, bring to mind, okay, what would they say or how would they help me? Or how can I carry their strength into my
Mm.
day? Because my mom, who was a very, very frail, tiny woman, had a willpower of steel, like literally. She was so strong. And she was also very funny. So, just remembering she could crack a joke. And that is true for a lot of my aunts and uncles too, that they would be very funny in lots of ways. And in the most serious moments, they would crack a joke and you would just like, oh, I mean, even when they're in the midst of a lot of pain, they would make a joke. So it's that connection with pain and sorrow and longing, as well as the joy and
Mm.
Mhm.
the ways that we connected with each other and
Yeah.
using that as a way to come back into my body, into my strength. And so, what I would say to the younger folks who are listening to this podcast, just look at your hands. And if you look at your hands, you will recognize that your hands resemble either your mom's or your grandmother's or your dad's or your grandmother's, someone in the ancestors. You're carrying that with you. My fingers look like my dad's, right? They're very wrinkled and things.
With time, with time, you will see.
Maybe not yours, Helen, but mine too.
No, my mom looks exactly like me. So I'm a replica of her. The only thing I got from my dad is my hair. So my hair is a little more wavy. My mom has like stick straight hair. But when you were saying the relationship you have with your mom is that like, I don't know what I would do without you. It's the same relationship I have with my mother. But I think I got my dad's, like, sense of humor because, to your point, Niloufer, he laughs at everything, and I think my mom has really benefited from that relationship because she's so heartwarming and generous. He is so funny. My grandma is at her later stages in life, and we're going back to the Philippines to have her last, like, I guess, stage of life there, you can say, and my mom was cracking this joke, and it just made me laugh because it was so true. She's been through World War II, she's been through famine, she's been through poverty, she's been through the death of my grandpa, and she's made out of steel. My grandma's fallen so many times just because she's, like, frail. My mom was like, "She's like steel. She just falls off and she just never break bone. And she's so strong." And, like, I was like, "Yeah, that's so true." But, like, the strength of my grandmother and, I don't know what I'd do without her because she's lived with my family for almost 2 decades. She helped raise me and my sister. It's so cool to hear how the specificity of each of our life stories brings up so many other stories too, and just the change of our facial expression, the way that we warm up. I think it brings up another topic for me if you're open to talking about
Mhm.
this. I think as therapists, I don't know if you've seen this or you've experienced this, but as someone on Instagram and TikTok, so much of what therapy has become has been embedded in our society, in our social language. But I think the consequence of that is we give out information without specificity of how it really applies to each individual's life, which is why I wanted to have this conversation because I think the "so what" is really built under context of each of our life experience. And so rather than problem solving, how do you advise that clients or patients search for, I guess, the solution? I'm using air quotes, quote unquote, into their own personal healing and recalibration of their nervous system.
Wow, that's a really deep question.
Yeah.
But I think that helps us bring us to the core of polyvagal theory and how we not only practice it and embody it for ourselves, but also how we relate with other people. So, we begin with our nervous systems, is what I say. It's your nervous
Mm,
system interacting with my nervous system. And we are in relationship. Like right now, in this moment, I feel this connection with the both of you,
Mhm.
right? That
yeah.
even though we are from different cultural backgrounds, we share. There is something about our experiences that we find that shared experience brings us closer and immediately has lots of cues of safety, right? So as we're relating with our clients, what is safe? So that there's safety is a very loaded word.
Mm,
I always try to unpack that a little bit because for a lot of people, and I would say for people who've lived in fear, lived in with a lot of trauma, people of color, communities of or even people who have experienced a lot of marginalization and discrimination don't know what safety is. And
wow.
so their nervous systems are coming in with as like, I don't know if I can trust you, right? That is
Right.
that a lot of time people come in, and I always thank people for the courage it took for them to come in, because there's a long process that happens before the person actually comes in to or even calls you or comes into your office of can I trust somebody? What do I need? And am I even going to be able to trust somebody to share about myself, right? So we honor the journey that people have taken to even get there. That's monumental, I would say.
I agree.
And
Yeah.
so when I'll just share it in terms of when I work with people and when a client comes in, I'm really working with my own nervous system first, not only to anchor myself, but also tune in to my nervous system that tunes into the other person's nervous system. Now, something that we have learned, and Helen, I know that you learned this recently in your own background educational program that you went through, is in the process in counseling, we learn about How do we listen deeply?
Mm.
Now, I taught counseling for 29 years, and I wish I had the language of polyvagal theory to go back and teach it again, because what are we listening to? Not only are we listening to their stories, but we're listening to how their nervous system is responding in the moment, how my nervous system is responding. So it's in
Mm.
relationship. I'm using my nervous system as a tool. Stephen Porges talks about it. Incidentally, Stephen Porges, I want to just mention him too, because he is the founder of this theory. If And just a side note, that he is the most amazing, delightful human being who embodies everything that he talks about. And so does uh, Dana. And I just want to honor the two of them because they have personally encouraged me to do this work. And I know
Wow.
Gina feels that encouragement too.
Mhm.
But and Stephen Porges talks about that we're using, and Dana talks about this too, that we're using our nervous system really as a tool in the
Mm.
process of connection to how is it that we can align our nervous system. Our nervous systems are talking to each other. Right now, our nervous systems are communicating, right? And
Right.
the slightest, especially for people who have been traumatized, the slightest cue of danger is picked up. Now, this is very true for people of color, especially in communities of color. And people who've been marginalized, people who live in lack of safety, they don't understand what safety means. So sometimes we begin with the lack of safety rather than what makes you feel safe, right? Because that's where they are a lot of times. So that's just that initial space. I know Gina does a lot as well. And if you have
No, I
more
think
stories around that.
no, Niloufer, you touched on so many things, and I'm so glad that you honored Dr. Porges and Dana because they are really the journeyers that we've all, are having this conversation as we mentioned
Mhm.
even the last time. And so they will one day be our ancestors too, right?
Mhm.
If not one of us earlier, I don't know. We never can predict. But yes, it's similar to Niloufer. I think just with polyvagal theory, understanding the nervous system and your states from an embodied internal way allows you to enter into maybe not looking for safety, but is it even safe enough to go and look in the nervous system?
Mm.
So with a client, I will give them some context first. Context is really important. So in polyvagal theory, in order for well-being, in order for you to feel safe, we need context, choice, and connection. So in order for you, you have to understand the context. So often the client will know, finally have enough courage to reach out to all these people on Psychology Today, for example, or what it's so overwhelming to choose even the therapist.
Huh.
That alone is hard to find unless somebody refers you. And even then, you're still, I met somebody just for the first time last week in person, and I had the luxury of meeting her in person because for a walk and talk therapy session. And it's so important because we can do this on screen, but there's a different experience. If I can just meet you once, then I can kind of connect to your heart. Like, what's actually happening in your nervous system? It's hard to develop that relational trust in your first session. So if I can introduce the nervous system talk and just sort of have them, it's an invitation. Are you curious about why you're anxious or even why you're coming to see me today? Would you like to learn more? And often, if this person was an accountant, so numbers are her thing. Biology makes sense because it's a language. We can use polyvagal as a language. So math is a language, polyvagal theory is a language. So she got it. She says, yes, I'd want to do that. Ancestral work, probably not. Deeply coming into the body, being, really feeling not yet ready. So it really does become this portal, this doorway into, hey, can I feel safe enough to engage with the therapist, me, and have enough cues of safety? But there is a something that Dana talks about in her work and polyvagal theory is when the cues of safety outweigh the cues of danger, then we can begin to have a conversation around safety, relative safety, or even about what's actually happening.
Mm.
And so if those are high enough, right, then we can actually start to begin to look at what are the cues of danger? And for communities of color, for me, in terms of my racial and cultural context of walking into a room, like that choir example, right?
Yeah.
That was just a huge cue of danger. But once I discern, right, there's a question in this moment with this experience of being in a choir with all and seeing all these white bodies, is the level of my intensity of wanting to run and hide um, needed, right?
Yeah.
That's a discerning question. And then I went, no, I mean, I'm just not going because I really would like to have other people that look like me represented in this choir. So I can make a choice. Right now, I can make a choice and go, no, still not safe enough. Still don't feel safe. Cues of danger is too high. Way too many white bodies in this space. And then I can go, Gina, this isn't about a lack of self worth or that you're not wanting to participate in singing. This is simply because you can reclaim what it is that you want to do that's right for you, you know? So
Mhm.
all of these beautiful polyvagal theory principles can now become applied in our lived experience and truthfully. Yeah. So in terms of safety, you get to make those choices if you come into a ventral place of connection, right?
Right.
With not only yourself, with your body, but with others, with the environment, and then with spirit, however that looks like to you. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Because I love that we're going into the more concrete and less of the theory. Because I do think for those of you that haven't listened to part one, you should. Like, why women of color carry stress differently was what the episode was titled. But I think that the beauty of going into the concrete is so that people have an understanding of what are we ready for? Really looking at the whole bag of what clients carry, what I've carried, what we all have carried. There's a level of grief, there's a level of searching, there's a level of questioning that goes into therapeutic work. And because we've also experienced it, they say that research is actually me search, right? That
Mm,
like so
I
much of
like that.
why we do the work that we do. I'm reading a book right now by Dr. Arthur Brooks called The Meaning of Your Life, where he talks about how so much of society has been depleted. Modern culture has been depleted of purpose because of ChatGPT, because of social injustice, because of the way that our life is moving. We've lost touch of what it means to be needed by someone, what it means to have community, family, etc. But Niloufer, I'd love for you to dive into the problem-solving piece if you're
Right.
open to it.
Well, because I think that especially if you're looking at it from an Asian perspective, a South Asian perspective, a lot of times people come in and say that I need you to help me solve this problem, right? Because that's the
Mhm.
way that people might. And generally speaking, that's what people want to do, that I come in, there's a problem, I will need you to help me solve it, right?
Right.
the and a lot of therapy, if you look at historically and looking at all the different theoretical approaches, is about that, listening to your story, getting to what are the core issues, how do we get that. Cognitive behavior might use a different approach, behavioral approaches, looking at how we embody some of the work related to polyvagal theory or the nervous system. The problem is not necessarily the problem, right? Even from a systems perspective, that there is something deeper than that. And problem solving tends to be more of a cognitive approach,
Mhm.
right? And so this is, if we can go deep, go sort of bottom up and really understand how I'm experiencing the problem, what is it that I need? What does my body need? And if I can understand my nervous system, it helps me integrate that information. It helps me understand the story that I have created. State creates story, that Dana talks a lot about, is of what is my nervous system saying? How is it experiencing the problem? And in what way might I solve? So just somebody telling me that this is the way to solve it, which sometimes helps, because I do feel that at times nervous systems feel better when somebody tells them, like, can I offer you? And I always ask my clients, I have some suggestions or I have some thoughts. Can I offer that? Would that be okay? And they're like, yes, please. I do want to know that. So I tell them about my own experiences and how might have solved the problem or what has helped me in that situation. So I'm not saying that there's not a place for that, but it is integrated with the process of really listening deeply from an embodied space. What really is the problem? And how do we tap into that wisdom? I want to say that how do we make this contextual for our lives in terms of people of color as well as working with communities of color? That goes back to that ancestral piece that we talked about earlier, is that the deep wisdom I carry within me is not just my wisdom, but the wisdom that I have inherited from the my generations past. I feel like I stand on the shoulders of others, which means that not only is there a legacy that I am carrying forth, but I also draw on the wisdom of that. So do you see what that nuance does? Is that
Yeah.
problem is not just mine to solve, but we're going to collectively solve this. We're going to come
Mhm.
together. And that's the co-regulation piece that helps us in that process, is that I'm here. We're going to work this. So sometimes I'm telling my clients, I don't know exactly. I'm equally at a loss, or I'm struggling with the same thing that you are. Honestly, there are times like, during COVID times, we were all struggling with it, right? Right now, with the fear of ice and, at any point being swept up, we have different privileges. I'm privileged in this place right now being a citizen, but, when I'm out there, I'm like everybody else, right? So sometimes I don't have the answers and will say, let's brainstorm together, because maybe what you're going
Mhm.
to offer me, what we come up with, is going to also help me in this process. And that creates relationship. That creates connection. That creates a sense of understanding, taking a little bit away of the power dynamics by honoring the situation, honoring the problem, and honoring the person or the community or the group sitting in front of us, right?
Right. I do want to just ask this because for people that have grown up in unhealthy family systems and might carry the wisdom of past family trauma in their bodies, because
Mm-hmm.
some of the clients we treat go through that. What's the so what behind that? Of how do they heal from perhaps unhealthy family patterns and unhealthy family stories?
Gina, you want to start with that?
Sure. So, I just wanted to go back because if a client does come to me in person with this overarching story of not having had a supportive history, I still think it's really important for them to have a deep psychoeducation piece about the nervous system. And in our case, we use polyvagal theory, right? So you have a sense of, oh, I understand why I'm anxious, or why I feel this way about my family, why I'm depressed, or why I'm shut down a lot when I go to family functions and I don't want to be there, or because they know the stories. They know the cognitive stories because it's over and over and over again, they get the same result, right? So when they do come in and have that psychoeducation piece, then I'll invite them to say, let's put that aside. Dana even suggests, let's put the stories aside, but can we hear the story of your nervous system, right? So they'll come back into their bodies. And then from that place, I often do a family genogram as my initial consultation. I spend 90 minutes and we do an initial consultation. And I said, do you mind if we just listen to the story of your family? Not so much the nervous system, but just so we can identify 3 generations. What happened? Like, where were you born, siblings, all of that, if you've ever made a sort of a family tree, but it's one that actually allows for space for them to see what are some of the inherited patterns, what are some of the entanglements, what are some of the beautiful gifts that have been passed on. And so from that place, they begin to feel in their nervous system. They'll say, oh, I'm very much like my father, or I'm very much like my mother, or I don't want to have anything to do with them. I'm really close to my grandmother. There's something about the grandparents, if they're in a healthy relationship, but we'll often find through looking just at that simple genogram of family, they'll identify why they don't have healthy relationships, in their maternal line. Maybe there might have been multiple infidelity that happened in one, and then in the father, it might have been alcoholism. And they start to see why they've been intercepting all of this, right? Really unconsciously, because it's what we see as children. We don't have the cognitive capacity to process. And so when you talk about what would I do first, that's essentially I take it so slow. And it's so slow. And then once they understand a bit of the nervous system, then we look at it. So there's this collective piece, and then there's a little bit more individual, like, why are you shaped the way that you are? Right? There's nothing wrong. It's just the way your nervous system has adapted. And then we do the personal profile map, which you've done, right? And then we get to see understanding all the different multitudes of flavors in the way and the textures and the dimensions of how we operate at dorsal level, at the shutdown level. And then it's this beautiful Tao, right? Like the way of moving with your clients. And it's
So cool.
subtle and it's beautiful and it's so respectful of their process. So
That's so
yeah.
good. I'm actually taking a couple courses right now, and one of the things that the a professor told me was that you have to understand the slow food. Dr. David Pallison is his name. You have to understand the slow food of trying to understand a client's story because it does take time. But it's also fascinating because I'm connecting the dots right now of how understanding the nervous system helps you understand the systems and the places that a client is raised in. It helps you understand the attachment wounds that might take place. It also helps you understand perhaps some of the cognitive distortions, the negative patterns of thinking that they may be coming from, and how that also lines up to family constellations, right? Some of the most pivotal personal work I've done is creating a family genogram and just the aha of understanding, oh, that's why I have all of these cues for danger that may not make sense. That's why I'm so easily triggered. This is why I'm so quick to make assumptions as opposed to giving people space to explain, right? And just the cognitive understanding of that helps me understand my own biology. So I appreciate that explanation, Gina. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that just knowing, for those who've their story is a lot of trauma in their families, that they don't feel that they can anchor themselves perhaps in their ancestors. I think that the knowledge that the wounds perhaps that I carry are not just my own, but also
Mm.
the wounds of the past. That helps, I think, to understand that why is it that I can't get over this, right? And sometimes the healing needs to happen intergenerationally. And of course, there's a lot we can talk about it in that space. However, knowing that it's not just my wounds that I'm carrying, attachment wounds, that my mother, for instance, my mother may also have had attachment wounds, and she could not take care of me in the way that she would have wanted to take care of me because her nervous system was in this place, right? So just having that knowledge also helps to relieve you of, or even have a deeper understanding of, like, okay, there are things that I can do, but there might be some things that are deeper than me or bigger than me that I might also need to let and to release, so that those are not my wounds that I'm carrying. That's not my pain that I'm carrying. It's a long process. I love what your professor is saying is the slow
Mhm.
food of savoring, the slow food of um, experiencing the food and then digesting it. Uh, whether that digestion that takes place in our system is helping me or getting me, more agitated about things.
Mm.
That's a beautiful metaphor that
Yeah.
you use
Mhm.
and that your professor is using.
Yeah. They're age-old principles of just taking time to get to know a person and how rare that is.
Mhm.
And the co-regulation that is happening, I think it is important for us to talk about the connection and the relationship that you have. And you've
Yeah.
always known, right? So I often say that in the real estate world, it is location, location, location. In the counseling world, in the mental health world, it is relationship, relationship, relationship. This is nothing new. always known that. But if we can understand what is happening in the process of connection, how are my cues of safety and danger being transmitted in my relationship? What is it that the other person is communicating with me? How my nervous system, how might I not only listen into my nervous system, but also recognize that there are certain cues that I might be giving that is not cues of safety and how we connect and how we relate. I'll give you an example, like a real concrete example. So, you know how I had a client who there's a lot of trauma, a lot of sexual trauma that brought in. And so there was at one point that was really agitated, and I could just see that her nervous system, as we were talking about, was just really revving up. And so what do we normally, what we do is we tend to bring them down, right? So like I would use my nervous system to kind of calm them down, say, okay, maybe use my voice, maybe a calmer voice, maybe a softer voice, maybe a more loving voice. And what I noticed as I started to do that is that the client got activated even more.
Mm,
Couldn't figure out what was going on until a client shared with me that that was the voice that their aggressor used, that was the voice that they were groomed. That was the grooming voice. So do you see what I'm saying? We don't know what we are transmitting or
bringing, yeah,
how the other person is receiving our cues. We may think that that might be helpful, but fortunately she felt safe enough to tell me that that was what was happening for her. But I wouldn't, I would have not known that that was going on. So that gave us new insights. And we sometimes don't know the story. We never know the full story. Let's just put it out there. We never know the full story. We think we do, but we don't. Sometimes
it's so true.
I worked with clients 6, 7, 8 years, and then I actually get to what really is 8 years later. What was the story? It takes that long sometimes
Yeah.
when it's so
Yeah,
complex.
that's so true. I was in therapy for 8 years with my therapist as I was studying the work of therapy. And I wrote about this at one point, but it's such a different experience when you know the feeling of grief and depression and you're able to work through it with someone else. But sometimes like it's so easy to forget in the process of like, why can't I understand or why can't I connect, you know? And so as therapists, how do you bring patience in the room knowing that the
Mm.
counseling process does take time, that trust does take time, right?
Yeah. Can I add something here? Just I think
Yeah.
it's such a juicy and so relevant for therapists because we
Mhm.
tend to, it's not a one and done. You come in, it's
Correct.
not solution focused therapy. I'm not here for 6 weeks. Like, it's okay to be in therapy for as long as you need to be in therapy. And however you
Mhm.
see therapy, if you don't want to use the word therapy, you use something else. Just like, having tea with someone that you trust,
Mhm.
you know,
Professional services.
yeah,
That
or
could be
some
what it is.
yeah, it's so interesting, but I have clients where I think and I have to sit in my own seat here going, I've been with this client for 5 years, and we're just slowly moving because every time we go back to survival, right? There's this drive to connect, and then problem solving happens, and they see through their nervous system where they've gained some momentum in their bodies to kind of shift a little bit, but then they go back into to shut down, which is a common loop, right? We go into survival, like, okay, I have a little bit of mobility to pivot a little bit, to change something, or to feel a little bit more energized, and then that doesn't feel safe, and then I'll go back down. So that's
Mhm.
a sort of this drive to connect, and then a pull to survive, kind of. But I myself, as a therapist, had wondered with this client, I don't know if I'm moving. I don't even know if I'm the right therapist for her. I don't know if I feel like I understand, for example, like polyamorous relationships, right? Like, do I know enough to explore this? And so there was a time where, because I was getting relicensed, that there was a gap in between my therapy sessions. And in the meantime, she looked for 2 other therapists. And then she came back to me, and I'm like, why did you come back? And she goes, because it just made sense. It just made
Mm.
sense. I trust you. We're doing work. It doesn't matter. I don't want to solve this problem. It's what she needed was she needed to co-regulate it. She needed one constant, predictable person that would show up time and time again and be present. And so, meanwhile, my nervous system might be questioning, I hope I'm giving her what she needs. And she tells me, I'm not asking to be healed. She knows it's her responsibility,
Mm.
but she wants to work. because we've developed this, what Niloufer was talking about. It is relationship, right? It's relationship building. And that made my nervous system feel softer because we have this idea that we have to be, as professionals, that we are, I don't like this word, but I would never call myself that, but a healer. I'm not a healer. They're the ones doing their own personal healing, but we get to witness. And all that slow food you were mentioning really is about, you were asking, how do I be patient? That's something for my work to be done. It is a relational, it's what's happening in your nervous system. They will know if you're just a little bit tad off. So let's give you some context. I'm tired today, right? But I'm here for you. So I just kind of wanted to bring that to make the work. We're human beings. At the end of the day, we are also experiencing death and loss and joy and beauty. And we can hold that and show up that way in all of our wholeness to our clients. And it gives them permission and it makes them feel accessible to share really what's fully in their heart. And that's what polyvagal theory does. It allows for that hopefulness to come through, that it's okay where you are in your nervous system. Dana always says there's no right or wrong. It's just the way of your nervous system. So I think of the Tao, right? It's bringing harmony to both and experiences and finding a place where you can feel safe enough in your body to do the work. Yeah.
Great. It's a beautiful story.
I love how you put that, Gina, in terms of that deep level of connection and showing up, right? And that the question about patience. That's one thing I would say that in all my work that I have learned is patience. How much patience you have to I'll speak for myself. I have needed to develop that has patience, being patient with a lot of patience with myself and patience in being able to hold what the client brings, patient with the process, patient with recognizing that all of the relationship ruptures and repairs, and especially when we're working with attachment wounds, we're constantly working on ruptures and repairs, ruptures and repairs. And it is in the repair that we build trust. That is the core place of coming back. And I have found that I have really needed to ground myself very actively. And I have a couple of images that I use for myself. One is a mountain, there's a mountain meditation, and that really speaks to me. It's like, I am the mountain. I just say I am the mountain to myself. And more recently, it's a tree. So in India, there's a banyan tree, which is, if you're familiar with the banyan tree, is the mother tree can have a very big trunk, but then it has roots that will grow down to the ground and it'll form its own tree trunks. And so you can have, acres of at least, several places of where the trees kind of grow up. And I just embody that tree so much that feels like, okay, I am the tree. I have become the tree. I'm holding the tree. I'm hugging the tree. And that gives me a way to really ground myself. And I find that I have to do that very often for clients who feel a lot of dysregulation. And I now having a conversation just recently yesterday about this, where the sometimes clients come in so dysregulated and especially our nervous systems are so, porous at times. We take on that dysregulation and their stories are so horrific that it's hard not to feel it in your nervous system. Sometimes I let my horror show, or I let myself sort of feel what they're expressing and say, like, my nervous system is vibrating at this time as I'm listening to you, or I am feeling it. It's a lot that you're gonna, and I used to worry about sharing that with my clients, but what I've found is clients appreciate that.
Yes.
Is that, gosh, I'm glad that you see the horror in it, right? You're not
Yeah.
just the blank slate that we talked about that I
Oh my
sort
gosh.
of take in.
Slate theory is so unreasonable. Like yeah. But anyways, Neil, go
Yeah.
ahead.
So in that moment, we are modeling as well. So how do I bring myself back into regulation? We're talking about, what I started to tell you is that Gina was talking about that. Can I really be regulated, fully regulated? in my session. For those of us who feel a lot of external threats, we're holding those threats along with our internal threats, right? So we can't let go of that sympathetic active of that fight flight response or whatever defense response that we have in our nervous system. However, what I often say is, can we be regulated enough? Can I know when I'm dysregulated? Can I know how to bring myself back into regulation? Can I do it with my client? Because sometimes I use tapping or, the butterfly taps, or in EMDR, we do the bilateral stimulation, and we just start doing that so that both of us can get regulated in the session at the same time, right?
Yeah.
And it's a way to model. It's a way to be with someone, to say, I'm not better than you. I'm not above you. I'm as human, and we can do this. We'll do this together. I'm with you. A lot of times I tell my clients is that I'm here with you in your journey, or in this moment, can you allow me to is it okay for me to take care of you while you're here in this moment? And so bringing in that co-regulation piece, bringing in the caring that they might not have experienced. Of course, we are always holding ethical guidelines in this process. And I feel that when we do this work where boundaries can sometimes feel blurred, we are having to be even more ethical in the ways that we respond, in making sure that we're doing no harm as best as we can, be aware of in the moment, or even be able to process that.
Right. Yeah. Well, Gina, did you have anything to add?
I love Niloufer's wisdom that always shines through in the sense of like inviting the client, right? And kind of being honest about where you are at in your nervous system and being honest about it. Like, I don't think you have to tell them the story. You can just say, "Oh, I'm a little bit activated right now, and I just want you to hold that your story actually moved me,
Mm,
to a different place in my nervous system. And are you okay if we travel together? Just take this phone. And oh my gosh, their nervous system feels like, thank you so much, because I was starting to really wonder about whether or not like you're even listening, or because I'm activated. And if I don't, right, we literally wear our nervous system on our face and our heart. And I'm probably one of the, like, people say you wear your nervous system, where you wear your heart on your sleeve. I think you wear it all over your body. Like you wear, right? It's not just your sleeve.
correct. How
It's
you
actually
talk, how you move, everything.
exactly,
Yeah.
because that is the co-regulation piece. We have these 5 cranial nerves that are connected to our eyes and our ears and the prosody of the way that we speak, and in our heart. And so if I'm agitated, you're going to feel it in a session for sure. And so one of the skill sets that we have as therapists is being able to lean in and feel our own nervous system at that moment when they might have shared something. And as Niloufer shared, like, I'm with you, but still be aware of where you're at in your nervous system as a therapist. And then ask them. You can start to see it in their body, because they really literally are broadcasting their nervous system through their words, through the tone of the pitch of their voice, right? One of the ways, though, just a practical way, just as we're, thinking of how do I bring this polyvagal theory to life? Like, what are some of the things I can do? Not only is breath, like just, inhale for 4 counts, exhale for 6, kind of like, so that you're transitioning from a place of, elevated heart rates to calming the nervous system. I often sometimes get my clients to stand up, and if they can find a wall, just like the tree example, because I'm a lover of trees, um, is actually lean against the wall so that some of your energy goes towards the wall, so it's carried down, right? Because often anxiety is up and forward. And so we tend to be this way. It's different from when you were all talking and I felt like I'm cued in, right? That's a different sort of sense of co-regulation, but that can also scare your client too. But
Too
those,
forward.
yeah, too forward. But just kind of like just that right movement. And if you're settling in towards your back, you can try it like after this
Right.
podcast. and just lean into your body and have that energy of anxiety move back towards the heart, towards the spine. And you'll start to notice it settle down because you're leaning against something that is support. And we forget that we have that support. If we are in danger and survival modes, we cannot, our physiology is not going to allow us, right? Our prefrontal cortex is not online. It can't cue for executive functioning to say, am I safe? So
Mhm.
that's where those glimmers that Deb Dana has incorporated, those micro moments of just a tiny moment of like, oh my gosh, like the tree, like outside my window is just enough for me to go, grounds me, whole ecosystem of mother tree, like the one mother tree. And then there's all these other little roots and branches of support. Or I know, my daughter's downstairs or my husband's here or, whatever. Those are those tiny glimmers. And you just being with the three of us and feeling the heart of your guidance, Helen, in this podcast that brought us
Thank you.
together is a glimmer. And then Niloufer, just your everything I've learned from you has been so helpful in terms of working with communities of color. I've just so appreciated
Likewise.
that,
Likewise.
So that feels more like a glow, a glimmer.
Big glow, I mean.
Yeah.
However, I just love the example you gave. It's such a beautiful, concrete example. I'm going to try it out for myself because I often bring in the visual of, whatever anchors people
Yeah.
in the moment. But actually doing that with a wall, I think is a
Mhm.
brilliant idea. Yeah.
It just lets go. We do that in family constellations when we start to merge with other people's family members in a session to let go and release, actually find things that we can resist against so that we're not taking in energy.
Mm,
So we move back into our bodies. And then this work is about going back and down and deep, right? I mean, yeah.
I wanna be respectful of your time because Niloufer, I know that you have to head out pretty soon. Any last words before we end our episode today?
I just want to say thank you to both of you. And I can share with that as I'm talking to you, I can feel my nervous system tingle, like my body tingles. Yes, I agree with you. I love what you're
Yeah.
saying. I love your wisdom. And so it's been such a treat to be with the both of you and to have this conversation. I had no idea where we were going today.
I love the direction.
Yes,
Yeah.
I
It's
love
it's
that we
why
followed our hearts.
Yes.
Yes.
yeah,
Thank
I
you, Helen.
agree.
Yeah.
You're very welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you. This was so much fun.
Yeah.
I love podcasts because it gives opportunity for deeper connection in a lot of ways, and the time has just flown. We've talked for about an hour and a half, if not longer.
And thank you so much, Helen. I think you really wear your the title of your practice with incredible integrity and
Thank you.
just deep heart, like of being sincere and genuine and so fully you. Like, yeah,
Thank you. Thank you. I
lovely
appreciate
Thank
you.
light.
you.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah.
thanks.